Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Story 1. I never believed in skinwalkers. Not really. Not until last summer. I live in a small town in New Mexico, right on the edge where the desert turns into thick pine forests. It's quiet out here, isolated, the kind of place where you hear your own thoughts too clearly at night. But that's what I always liked about it. The silence, the stillness. I grew up hearing stories about things that lurked in the dark, creatures that could wear the skin of men but were not men. But those were just tales, just old superstitions, whispered by my grandmother when the fire burned low. I never put much stock in them. Then, one night, something screamed outside my bedroom window. It was 2 a.m., and I was lying in bed, drifting somewhere between sleep and wakefulness when the sound tore through the night like a jagged knife. It wasn't the yipping of a coyote or the distant howl of a wolf. It was human, but wrong. A wail that slid between laughter and sobbing, like someone was crying out in pain and joy at the same time. It made my skin crawl. I sat up in bed, holding my breath. The sound came again from just beyond the tree line at the back of our property. It was closer this time, too close. I grabbed the flashlight from my nightstand and my dad's old hunting rifle from the wall. My fingers were clumsy with sleep, my heart beat too loud in my ears. I told myself it was just some drunk or a wounded animal, nothing to be afraid of. But when I stepped onto the back porch, I knew I had made a mistake. The air was dead still. No wind, no crickets, no rustling leaves. The kind of silence that makes you feel like the whole world is holding its breath. And then I saw it. At first, I thought it was a deer, the way it crouched low near the fence line. But as my flashlight beam hit it, my stomach dropped. It wasn't a deer. It was a thing. Its limbs were too long. Its body twisted in a way that made my eyes hurt to look at it. Its skin was stretched tight over its bones, its head too big, tilted at an unnatural angle. And its eyes, God, its eyes were like burning coals, reflecting the light in a way that shouldn't have been possible. Then it spoke, in a voice that sounded just like my mother's. "Come here, it's cold." Every muscle in my body locked up. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My mom was asleep inside. I knew she was asleep inside. This thing, whatever it was pretending to be her. Slowly it stood up, bones cracked, popping like they hadn't been used in years. It unfolded itself until it towered over the fence, its mouth stretching too wide, splitting its face into something that almost resembled a grin. My body finally caught up with my brain. I took a step back, raising the rifle with shaking hands. My finger found the trigger, but I didn't fire. Not yet. The thing took a step toward me, then another. Then it tilted its head, like it was listening to something I couldn't hear. And then it did something that will haunt me for the rest of my life. It laughed. Not a normal laugh. Not human. It was high-pitched, unnatural, like a recording played backward. And then, in the blink of an eye, it moved. Not like a person, not even like an animal. It scuttled, its limbs jerking, its body low to the ground, moving faster than anything that size should have been able to. I fired. The shot rang out through the night, deafening in the silence. But the thing was already gone, vanishing into the trees like it had never been there at all. I stood there for what felt like forever, my heart hammering against my ribs, my lungs burning because I had forgotten to breathe. When I finally found the strength to move, I went inside, locked every door, and sat awake until the sun came up. The next morning, I forced myself to go to the fence line, to look for proof that what I had seen was real, that I wasn't losing my mind. And I found it. There, in the dirt, were handprints, but they weren't human. They were too big, the fingers too long, and at the tips of each one, claw marks. We moved 2 weeks later. I don't go outside at night anymore. Story 2. I was 15 when it happened. My family lives on a Navajo reservation in Arizona, way out where the land stretches on forever and the nights are blacker than sin. The kind of darkness that swallows you whole. My grandmother always told me stories about skinwalkers, witches that could shed their own skin, take the form of animals, steal voices. She said they were real, that I should never whistle at night, never call out to anything I couldn't see, and never answer if something called my name. I didn't believe her. Not then, but I do now. That night, I was walking home from her place. It wasn't far, just a short walk down a dusty road, the kind that stretched on forever under a full moon. The kind of road that made you feel like you were the only person left in the world. It was so quiet. No crickets, no wind, just my footsteps crunching on gravel. Then I heard something else. Footsteps, not behind me, ahead of me. I stopped. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. There was someone standing in the road. Tall, thin, too thin. I squinted, and my stomach clenched. His clothes were all wrong, torn, hanging loose like they didn't belong to him. His feet were bare, and his head was tilted too far to the side, like his neck was broken. The air turned heavy. My skin prickled. Then he spoke, and I felt my knees go weak. Michael, come here. I need your help. It was my dad's voice. But my dad was home. He was asleep in bed. This wasn't him. The thing shuddered. Its body twitched, jerking like a puppet with its strings pulled the wrong way. And then, it took a step forward. I felt my body scream at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Then it glided. Not like a person, not like anything human. It didn't walk. It just moved. Smooth, silent, coming for me. Something inside me snapped, and I turned and ran. I ran so fast my lungs burned. My feet pounded the dirt, kicking up dust. Behind me, I heard it whispering. Michael. The voice was wrong. Stretched, twisted, too low, then too high, like it was trying to remember how to speak. Michael, wait. No. I sprinted toward my house. I could see the porch light. Just a few more feet. Just a few more. Then I heard laughter. It came from the trees to my left. Low, rough, rotten. I risked one look back. The road was empty. But the trees, something was in the trees. I couldn't see it, but I felt it. A shape shifting between the branches. Watching, smiling. I slammed into my front door, shaking so bad I could barely get the lock open. When I finally did, I collapsed inside, gasping, heart pounding like a hammer in my chest. My grandmother found me on the floor. She knew. She saw it in my face. She grabbed my shoulders, shook me once, and whispered, "Never answer when it calls your name. Never." That night, she burned sage. She prayed over me, but I don't think it mattered, because sometimes On the wind, in the dead of night, I still hear it, calling my name, and I never look outside. Story 3. I worked the night shift at a gas station just off a lonely stretch of highway in Utah. It's the kind of place you stop at when you're desperate, when your gas light's been on too long, or when the caffeine in your system isn't enough to keep you from nodding off at the wheel. It's quiet most nights, just me, the buzzing fluorescent lights, and the occasional trucker coming in for coffee and cigarettes. The pay isn't great, but it's enough. And honestly, I don't mind the solitude. At least I didn't. Not until that night. It was 3:12 a.m. I remember the exact time because I had just glanced at the monitor, watching the live feed from the security cameras. Nothing interesting, just the empty parking lot, the highway stretching out into the black, and the flickering neon glow of our sign, half the letters burned out. Then movement. A man stood near pump 4, his back to the store. He hadn't been there a second ago. I was sure of it. The cameras covered every angle, and I would have seen him walk up. But there he was, standing completely still. Something about him made my skin crawl. I don't know why. Maybe it was the way he stood, too stiff, too rigid, like he wasn't breathing. Maybe it was the way the security camera feed glitched for a second when he appeared, static fuzzing across the screen. I leaned forward, squinting at the monitor. His clothes were ragged, dark pants, a torn hoodie, no shoes. It was freezing out, the kind of cold that bites into your bones. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The air was heavy, too still. "Hey sir, we're closed," I called. My voice sounded wrong, too small in the emptiness. He didn't move. I walked a few steps closer, shining my flashlight on him. The light should have cast a shadow, but for some reason, it didn't. That was when he twitched, not like a person startled awake. No, it was sharper, more violent, like a marionette with its strings yanked. His head snapped to the side. Fast, too fast, like he'd just heard something only he could hear. Then he turned around. I stopped breathing. His face was wrong. His skin looked too tight, like it had been stretched over a skull that wasn't quite the right shape. His eyes were too big, wide and staring, reflecting the light in a way that reminded me of an animal caught in headlights. But it was his mouth that made my stomach drop. It was too wide, too long. His lips curled into a grin, but it wasn't human. And then his jaw unhinged. I swear to God, it stretched down to his chest, a gaping black hole of a mouth, filled with rows of needle-sharp teeth. And then he ran at me, not like a man, not even like an animal. It was wrong, the way he moved, too fast, his limbs bending the wrong way, his hands scraping the pavement as he lunged forward. I ran. I made it to the door just in time, slamming it shut, fumbling with the lock. He hit the glass hard, smearing it with filthy handprints, his too wide grin never faltering. Then he laughed, a deep, wet, gurgling sound like something choking on blood. And then he crawled away. I don't mean walked. I don't mean ran. He crawled, his arms bent the wrong way, his body jerking and twitching as he scuttled into the darkness, disappearing beyond the glow of the station lights. When the cops arrived, they found nothing. No footprints. No sign that anyone had been there at all. I didn't sleep that day. I didn't sleep the next, either. But the following night, when I came back from my shift, I knew he had. Because there were handprints on the window, and they were waiting for me.